Hello, and welcome back to the third edition of 5 PS1 games worth playing. Another reminder, this isn't a top 5 games list, just 5 out of the bigger list. Something I've been noticing as I've been making these videos is that my PS1 collection has been neglected over the years. I have around 250 PS1 games, which certainly isn't a small collection, but taking into account that I literally own over 200 more PS2 games than PS1, I've realized that I need to focus more on my PS1 collection. Devil Dice. Marketed as a devilishly addictive puzzle game, Devil Dice lives up to that name with ease. Conceptually simple. You move a little cutesy devil around on top of dice, flipping and turning each die until you line up the same number of dice with the same number on top. For example, touching 2 dice with the number 2 face up will make those dice disappear. And since the dice slowly disappear from the screen, that allows you to continuously combo by adding more dice with the same number. As those 2 slowly disintegrate through the floor, keep flipping dice around to touch the disappearing dice with the same number for more crazy combo opportunities. Touching a number 1 to any of the disappearing dice will make all the dice with the 1 face up disappear. Like I said, simple concept which leads to some incredibly addictive gameplay. Aside from a pretty comprehensive training mode, Devil Dice also has a puzzle mode, sort of the quest mode where you wrap your brain around 100 developer-designed puzzles, a trial mode, both time trial and endless, where you play alone and try to get the best score before your time runs out or until the entire field is full, a 2-player battle mode where you battle against a friend or a computer opponent, first to fill a set number, either 3 or 5, combination in a box on top of the screen wins, and the Insanity of War mode, which is a 5-player match where you battle against 4 other human, with the multi-tap, or computer opponents getting combos to drain their life. The puzzle mode is a single-player quest mode in the game. Gamers are forced to make their way through 100 developer-designed puzzles. The objectives are simple. Make all the dice in the field disappear by getting the set number shown in the top corner of the screen. For example, the puzzle may have the objective of getting 5 5s. Sounds simple enough. The problem being, you have to get it in a preset number of steps. Run out of steps, and you die. Every step you make counts. And though it is in a linear preset pattern you have to discover, the challenge is finding the exact pattern needed to pass each puzzle. The difficulty amps up pretty quickly. Admittingly, I did not complete the puzzle mode before I made this video. I'm currently stumped. But the good thing is the puzzles unlock in sets of 10, so if you're stumped on one, you can move on to the next one, and come back to the other one later. This keeps you playing in case you get frustrated with a tough puzzle. To be honest, it's been a long time since a game has required this much concentration from me, and the puzzle mode has required me to shake the rust off a part of my brain I haven't used much lately. When the puzzle mode gets too heavy, there's always the multiplayer modes. Battle mode is a head-to-head versus mode where you take on another opponent in order to fill the brackets at the top of the screen with combinations. Every combination you get fills a slot in the gauge, and the first to fill their brackets wins. Your opponent, however, isn't going to make this easy. Each player can steal each other's combinations either by completing the same combination your opponent already has, thus taking it, or by throwing the same numbered die on top of your opponent's before it disappears. Suffice to say, the tides can turn really quickly, and in a split second you can go from having one more combination to make to being in check, where your opponent has one more combination left to win. This mode gets pretty intense, the only downside being, when you're playing against the computer opponent is almost unforgiving. You've either got to be good or lucky to win. Those looking for a more even challenge should invite a friend over for hours of fun and trash talking. The war mode can best be described in one word: insanity. Yeah, insanity. In war, 5 players go at it trying to drain the other player's life by hitting combinations. With 5 players on screen fighting it out, things get extremely hectic, and again, your opponents don't make it easy. There's nothing like hitting 6 sixes and laughing because you're about to do massive damage to your foes, only to have one of them roll a 6 right up to it, thus stealing your combination and turning the damage on you instead. You almost have to guard your blocks until they disappear. You can also gain life by rolling a 1 on a disappearing line of dice, and you can do extra damage by chaining more of the same numbered dice onto your combo. And on the chance that one of your opponents finds himself on the ground by being stuck on a disappearing combo, you can roll over them, doing the same amount of damage as your die has on the top at the time you roll over them. This is another mode that the computer is almost perfect at. I have squeaked by with a win here and there, but I usually get stomped pretty quickly. However, if you happen to have a multi-tap, and 4 other sweaty bodies in the same room, the replay value of War Mode skyrockets. Just be sure to crack the window, light a candle, and keep some air fresheners handy, and bring your best trash-talking game, because you're about to lose at least an entire day to Devil Dice with your friends. If you get tired of the heaviness of the puzzle mode, or the insanity of the multiplayer modes, there is always the much more relaxed trial mode. You can play a timed mode, seeing how big of a score you can get in 3 minutes, exhibition, where you and a friend work with each other instead of trying to destroy each other, or the mode that keeps me coming back, endless time trial, where there is no time pressure, no opponents trying to ruin your combos, just you seeing how high a score you can get before the field fills up with dice. As time goes on, the dice appear faster and faster and things get pretty intense, but it's a completely satisfying experience. Devil Dice is actually a homebrew success story. In 1997, Sony released Net Eurose, a homebrew PlayStation kit to the general public. This kit allowed hobbyists to develop games on a PC, then transfer them through a special cable to the sleek black Eurose PlayStation consoles. I don't have a lot of experience with Eurose games aside from the 3 that I've played off of a PlayStation Underground disc, so I can't comment on the overall quality of the average Eurose title. I just know that it had a dedicated community behind it before Sony shut it down in 2002. Though homebrew wasn't a totally new concept, Eurose is still a pretty awesome idea. And though I'm sure the final product of Devil Dice is probably higher quality than it would have been if it was just simply a Eurose project, it's still cool to see such a great game come from humble origins. Devil Dice is an incredibly addictive game. Whether playing by yourself or with a room full of friends, this seemingly simple game will keep you playing for a very long time. And if you enjoyed Devil Dice, you should check out its even more overlooked sequel, Bombastic, on the PlayStation 2. It has all the addictive multiplayer modes of the original, but adds exploding die, a true single-player story mode, and it's also a little cheaper to find online. The PS1 has a great library of puzzle games. Games like Intelligent Cube, Roll Away, No One Can Stop Mr. Domino, Mr. Driller, and many, many more. The problem being, I don't own a lot of puzzle games on the PS1. So that only leaves me with these 2 suggestions. Bomberman Party Edition. To be honest, this is the only Bomberman game I own. I sort of missed out on the entire series until I acquired Party Edition. So while I can't comment on its quality compared to the rest of the series, Party Edition still rocks with 5-player multiplayer battles and a single-player mode that lets you play with PS1 or classic graphics. I'm horrible at this game by far, but if you have some friends to invite over, this one will keep you occupied for quite a while. Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo! In Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, you play as super deformed versions of Capcom fighting characters who are in charge of falling gems. Link 4 more gems together in a square and you form power gems. Touch a crash gem to gems of the same color, and you make them disappear, sending a barrage of counter gems at your opponent. The AI in the game, in typical Capcom fashion, can be extremely cheap. The super deformed characters in the game went over so well, Capcom actually released them into their own fighting game called Pocket Fighter on the PS1 and Saturn. Einhander. At about this time, the hardcore shoot-'em-up fans are rolling their eyes. You see, amongst their circles, Einhander is considered an extremely overrated game. However, coming from Squaresoft, Einhander is easily the most recognizable shoot-'em-up on the PS1, and is one of the most asked about games on my original 100 PS1 games video. So even if there are a plethora of better shoot-'em-ups in the PS1's underrated library of shooters, Einhander is easily the most recognizable one, and that's why I chose it. Given the strong lineup of PS1 shooters, I understand the sentiment of those who call it overrated, considering that amongst some crowds it's touted as the PS1's best, or to some even considered the greatest shoot-'em-up of all time. I don't consider it to be the greatest, even on the PS1, but I do consider it to be a great shoot-'em-up with tight gameplay and all the things that make the genre so fun. For me, Einhander was also my first fully polygonal shooter of this type that I played, and at the time, the first one I had played in years period. It sort of brought me back to the genre. In Einhander, you have a choice between 3 ship types, each with their own different uses of gun pods, or weapons you collect off the enemies, to take on an entire planet full of enemies. There's plenty of hectic shoot-'em-up gameplay to enjoy in this game. Tons of things to dodge, a large variety of enemies, with the larger enemies having separate damage points on them, meaning you can destroy them piece by piece, and also large, well-designed boss fights. As I said, the game has everything that makes for a great shooter. Even the genre elitists have to admit that Einhander, despite the backlash shown towards it in some circles, is still a great addition to the PS1 shooter library. The game, by PS1 standards, looks great and the controls are spot on too. If you die, it's your fault. The music, as you may expect from a game developed by Squaresoft, is also exceptional and matches the pace of the game perfectly. There are also adjustable difficulty levels for people like me who suck at this genre, and for those who are masters looking for a higher degree of difficulty. The only small complaint I would wage against Einhander is the same complaint I have with a lot of polygonal shooters. With all the flashy polygonal effects going on screen, it's sometimes easy to miss enemy fire coming your way, leading to a swift death. As far as suggestions go, I decided to stick with shooters with a similar polygonal look to Einhander. There are actually tons of great shoot-'em-ups on the PS1, but my personal collection is a little lacking in the genre. Games like Ray Storm, Ray Crisis, Thunder Force 5, and R-Type Delta come to mind, but I don't own any of those. G Darius. The first polygonal entry into the long-running Darius series features the series' trademark giant fish bosses and branching level paths, where upon beating the first level, you are then given a choice between 2 different levels to play next, leading to a pyramid setup of levels and 5 different endings to see. G Darius plays great, looks great, with some slowdown in some areas, and even gives the player the ability to capture enemy ships and use them as weapons. Oh, and it even features 2-player co-op gameplay, something Einhander does not. Shooter Space Shot. This is one that you should take with a grain of salt. Shooter Space Shot was a budget shooter released near the end of the PS1's lifespan. It was one of the many generically named games that were localized to make a quick buck for developers, and overall is a bit of a generic shooter. It's pretty short and even has some cheesy CGI movies in between each stage to tell the story. However, it has a few cool ideas in it, like a lock-on system similar to Ray Storm or Panzer Dragoon, a dash move that lets you dash past enemy projectiles or destroy enemies with it, and 2 extra gun pods that you can set to a specific position as needed. There's even a training mode that acts like almost a separate minigame in itself. In the midst of so many great PS1 shooters, Space Shot may not stand out as anything special, but I suggest it for the fact that this solid shooter title is easily the cheapest shoot 'em up to buy on the PS1. I acquired my copy for a little over $5 with shipping, and for what you get for the price, this is a great buy. Fear Effect. So what happens when Chronos, a seemingly failed fighting game developer, responsible for such games as Dark Rift, Criticom, and Cardinal Sin, decides to throw in the towel in the fighting genre and give a brand new genre a try? Well, the end result is one of the PlayStation's best action-adventure games in Fear Effect. When the daughter of Hong Kong's most powerful triad leader goes missing, information leaked to Hana from a friend inside the organization, she teams up with two other mercenaries, Glass and Deke, with plans to recover the girl and ransom her back to her father. Thus starts a journey that starts in Hong Kong, Blade Runner style, and ends in hell. Fear Effect uniquely blends cinematic storytelling into an action-adventure game to successfully create the feeling that you are controlling an interactive animated movie. The core gameplay and control system is similar to games like Resident Evil, think tank controls, but with action and story replacing the horror elements. A streamlined inventory system that removes the need for clunky inventory menus, and even a fear meter which gets rid of health pickups. The core mechanics of the game, while feeling similar to Resident Evil, are much improved in Fear Effect, which uses them with a different focus. The game itself is very cinematic, from the deep story to even the lively backgrounds, which are actually looping full motion video sequences, giving them so much more life and charm than other games that use lifeless pre-rendered backgrounds. The world around you just feels alive, creating the game's unique atmosphere. The character models themselves are shaded to look like cartoon cells. Hana and her friends aren't the only people searching for the girl, meaning the game throws plenty of triad thugs your way to dispose of. And as the storyline progresses, plenty of strange creatures too. Luckily, there is a fitting arsenal in the game at your disposal. You even have the option of sneaking up on some enemies for a one-hit stealth kill. And in keeping with the adventure side of action-adventure, there's also a heavy puzzle focus in the game, giving it its unique mixture of storytelling, action, and adventure. Fear Effect blends them all successfully, and is easily one of the most fondly remembered PS1 games. There are some small frustrations in the game, namely, sometimes cheap deaths that are sprung on you without notice. The fear meter or health meter, which eliminates the need for health pickups, can be inconsistent at times, meaning you can save yourself into a corner of death if you're not careful. And the puzzles can sometimes have obscure solutions, easily overlooked if you're not paying attention to the environments around you. The overall quality of the game, however, means that these minor complaints certainly don't ruin the experience. Fear Effect is remembered as one of the top PS1 adventures for a reason. It successfully blends storytelling, puzzle, and action into a unique experience. This, and its sequel Fear Effect 2 Retro Helix, are definitely must-play PS1 games. It's a pity that Chronos folded before we got to see Fear Effect 3 on the PS2. But you can always look up footage on YouTube and imagine what could have been. I had a bit of difficulty deciding which games to suggest. Most games that play similar to Fear Effect are in the survival horror genre, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and the like. And I would suggest Fear Effect 2, but that sort of goes without saying. And considering the alternative, more adventure focus, I decided on these two games. Covert Ops: Nuclear Dawn. While certainly not a top tier game, Covert Ops is still worth a look. terrorists have hijacked a train carrying the French ambassador to Russia and have brought a nuclear bomb on board to convince the French government to pay $30 billion. You are Casey Ryback, Lieutenant Jack Morton, the lone surviving NATO soldier, and it's your job to stop the terrorists. At first glance, Covert Ops seems reminiscent of games like Syphon Filter, but upon further play, you'll realize that the game plays more like Resident Evil on a train. In fact, the design is very much Resident Evil, including Resident Evil's most endearing trait, a complete shortage of ammo, which doesn't seem fitting for a game with an action focus. However, if you come into Covert Ops knowing what it offers, you will still find an enjoyable, if flawed, experience. Dino Crisis. I would actually say that Dino Crisis 2, with its complete change in direction to action over horror focus, would be a better suggestion. However, though I've played it, I don't own it. So instead, I'm suggesting the original Dino Crisis, which is best described as, well, what else? Resident Evil with dinosaurs. This one was pretty popular, so most PS1 collectors probably have it in their collections. But in case you overlooked it, it is a worthy alternative survival horror game. And considering, since the days of the Super Nintendo and Genesis, or Mega Drive for those of you in different territories, the vast majority of the games with Jurassic Park on them have been turds, Dino Crisis fills the void of running from dinosaurs quite nicely.
Hello.
Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee. So you're an exploited slave worker with your mouth sewn shut, working for a giant evil corporation that is so money obsessed they are willing to do anything to turn a profit, up to and including turning their largest working force into an edible meat product with little regard for said slaves. If this describes your situation, please quit your job at Walmart immediately and find a better one. However, if you happen to live on Oddworld, chances are your name is Abe, and this is your Oddysee. Upon eavesdropping on a corporate meeting in which is revealed to Abe a plan to turn all Mudokons, Abe's species, into a meat snack, Abe decides to escape and save as many of his fellow Mudokons as possible along the way.
I just had to escape. I just had to be free. And I didn't even know I had a destiny. So, get me out of here!
The basic gameplay mechanics mimic classic side-scrollers like Prince of Persia and Flashback. However, Abe's Oddysee throws its own twist on the formula with the game's speak function. In order to save his fellow Mudokons, Abe has the ability, through certain button commands, to get them to follow him. In fact, most of the game's puzzles revolve around this feature. Abe also has the ability to chant and possess his enemies in the game, which, considering that Abe himself is weak and helpless, is a means for Abe to clear out other enemies in his way. It also lets you think of creative ways to dispose of your enemies. The front cover of the game describes it as no menus, no inventory bars, no scorekeeping, just infinite lives, victims to rescue, and inexplicably challenging gameplay, which sums Oddworld up very nicely. Every area of the game presents new puzzle-heavy challenges. Death awaits Abe or his Mudokon pals at every turn. Most of the puzzles in the game involve instant death from one tiny misstep, giving the game its challenge. This adds an insane amount of difficulty at times, but it's also very rewarding upon successfully completing each meticulously designed puzzle. I'm not one to make a claim like playing certain games can help raise your IQ, but Oddworld will definitely put your problem-solving skills to the test. Many gamers, however, may be put off by the trial and error aspect of the design. The developers gave Abe infinite lives for a reason, and without them the game would be nearly impossible for most gamers. Oddworld packs serious gameplay in an unserious shell, due to the game's use of humor. The world in which Abe's Oddysee takes place is indeed odd, or unique if you will. The art direction in the game's beautiful pre-rendered game environments and the high-quality CGI cutscenes help create a unique world in which the gameplay takes place. As simple as a 2D side-scroller may seem, Oddworld Inhabitants really did create an interesting world to explore long before the series ever moved into the 3D realm. Oddworld Abe's Oddysee is incredibly challenging, incredibly fun, and incredibly odd, with intense gameplay and a great sense of humor, making it easily one of the PS1's best side-scrollers. This isn't for the faint of heart. Completists who want to save all 99 Mudokons in the game will taste death an innumerable amount of times. But challenge shouldn't keep you from experiencing this odd game. The PS1 has an amazing library of side-scrollers, some with more adventure focus, some with more platformer focus, and while Abe's Exodus is the obvious choice, being the much harder sequel, adding new abilities, 2 discs, and 300 Mudokons to save, the two I wanted to suggest though were Heart of Darkness and Skull Monkeys, but I don't own those, so instead I went with these two. Tomba 2. Well, I have yet to pick up the original Tomba, having played it via a long demo on a PlayStation Underground Jam Pack demo disc. I did manage to get my hands on its fully polygonal sequel. To best describe Tomba 2, I would say it's a 2.5D side-scrolling adventure game. It contains many platformer elements in it, but it's actually more Metroid in approach than Mario in approach. The world has an open design to it, and you are even sent on quests by various characters throughout the game. Don't let the fact that the game seems geared towards younger gamers dissuade you from enjoying this simple to play but well-designed game. And both Tomba games are quite a bit cheaper than Klonoa is on the PS1. Wild 9. So what happens when Shiny, the creators of Earthworm Jim, try their hand at 2.5D platforming? You get Wild 9, a more action-focused side-scroller whose biggest claim to fame is the ability to grab enemies with an energy beam and then decide on what torturous death to give them, based on either bashing them into pieces or using environmental objects to dispose of them. The beam is also used for puzzle elements, and the game offers more variety than simply platformer gameplay, including falling scenes and scenes that involve flying a ship or riding a beast that are reminiscent of the Mode 7 scenes in Super Nintendo Star Wars games. The music is also rocking, coming from Tallarico Studios, but some of the songs are rehashed, like the Buttville theme from Earthworm Jim, and one that I swear is also on MDK. Still good stuff though, and the soundtrack is accessible by putting the disc into a computer or a CD player. Just don't play track 1 in a CD player. Syphon Filter. Coming seemingly out of nowhere to little fanfare at the time, Syphon Filter, along with its 2 sequels, has become one of the most memorable PS1 franchises. I remember it being described as something akin to GoldenEye for the PS1 prior to its release. But its spy espionage theme and objective-based mission gameplay are really the only similarities. With its story pacing, Syphon Filter feels a lot more like something out of a Tom Clancy thriller. A terrorist organization led by a man named Eric Romer is attempting to release the deadly Syphon Filter virus on US soil. And it's up to Gabe Logan, the top operative for a government agency simply known as the Agency, to stop Romer's dastardly plot and save the lives of millions. Syphon Filter is a mission-based action game whose plot unfolds like an action movie. Each mission starts out with set objectives, but Gabe is constantly getting new objectives radioed to him by his fellow operative Lian Zhang. giving the game its fast-paced feel with mission scripting where you never know what to expect next. Once the game starts, it doesn't stop. The star of the show in Syphon Filter is easily its gunplay. Gabe has 3 aiming modes. He can zoom into first person on the fly for a quick headshot. He automatically aims at his enemies on his own. And the most fun mode, he locks onto enemies, meaning in a very thrilling manner, Gabe can actually run in one direction and shoot an enemy in another direction. This makes the gunfighting a blast, so much so that you won't miss dual analog aiming if you go back and play it. Running and gunning is a joy, and few games have the simple fun factor that Syphon Filter does in their gunplay. Syphon Filter isn't all action though. There are even some adventure elements here and there, boss fights, story elements throughout, and even some stealth scenes which require memorization through trial and error. All the scenes are successfully interwoven into the storytelling in the game. A story which takes you from the mean streets of Washington, D.C. and ends in a Kazakhstan missile silo for one of the easiest end boss fights after an incredibly tough final mission. The game can be frustrating at times, and it's very scripted, even down to where certain enemies show up and attack you in the game. However, it is openly scripted, if you will. There may be one set way the developers want you to accomplish some things, but they leave it up to you to figure out how to do it. This can, again, sometimes lead to frustrating trial and error gameplay, with memorization being key. But the overall experience is so much fun, not even some frustrating parts will keep you from enjoying this game. Graphically, by PS1 standards, the game still looks good. Certainly not the prettiest PS1 game, but it does have a lot of fun interactivity to play around with in the environments. You can shoot out all the lights you want in the game, if you so please, and there are tons of environmental objects to shoot. The music is fitting and action-packed. I especially like the title theme. The voice acting isn't terrible, but it's certainly not the best. It does the job, but seeing as Gabe is modeled after Alec Baldwin, he has an annoyingly scratchy voice. However, it doesn't dampen the experience overall. Controlling Gabe feels a little sluggish. The basic controls are the tank controls found in games like Tomb Raider. However, once locked on, they switch to 8-way run controls on the fly, and the game does have analog support, though I just use the D-pad myself, which works well even when zoomed into first-person view. Syphon Filter is still a fresh-feeling, fun experience that every PS1 gamer should experience at least once. Heavy scripting with the movie-like focus and some of the most fun gunplay available on the PS1. Watching enemies fly back with a shotgun blast after being hit, or, need I mention, setting them on fire with the most epic taser in gaming history, is still just as fun to partake in today as it was in 1999. And if the original appeals to you, you should definitely check out Syphon Filter 2 and 3, with the second one being seen as the best, though incredibly hard at times. So much so that I usually avoid playing it and play the first and third ones more. Finding suggestions for this one was a hard choice. The ones I chose, one is an obvious choice, and the other because it was the game that Syphon Filter was inevitably compared to the most, even if they weren't comparable for the most part. So my 2 suggestions for this game are C12 Final Resistance. Coming from the team behind the Medieval series, C12 plays like a sci-fi version of Syphon Filter, right down to the same aiming system. The general design is less movie-like and more adventure in nature, but it's definitely worth a look, and you may have overlooked it seeing as it was one of the last notable releases for the PS1, being released in North America in August 2002, meaning chances are most gamers were already knee-deep in the next generation, be it PS2, Xbox, or GameCube. Metal Gear Solid. Okay, I caved here. It was inevitable at the time of Syphon Filter's release that it was going to be compared to one of the greatest and most historically significant games of all time. Are they completely comparable? Not at all. But I had a tough time finding a competent other game to fit this category. ruling out Tomorrow Never Dies, Spec Ops, and Duke Nukem Time to Kill, which is more Duke Raider than Syphon Filter. I probably don't have to tell you much that you don't already know about Metal Gear Solid, and if I was to cover it fully, I would probably have to do an entire video devoted to this game alone. 1998 was one of the most historically significant years in gaming history, and games like Metal Gear Solid and Half-Life helped shape gaming into what it is today. And for those of you saying, hey, what about the so-called greatest game of all time, which was released in that year? I'm taking the stance, if you can't say something nice, don't mention Ocarina of Time at all. Though I just did. And there you have it. Thank you for watching my third 5 must-play PS1 games video. Again, this isn't a top 5 game video, just 5 games in a bigger list. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, it took me a while to get this one out because I was a little burnt out. I like making these videos, but eventually, inevitably, they make gaming feel a little bit like work, so I was a bit burnt out. Was gonna do some other videos, but I got sidetracked, but then I came back. Because when you think about it, I have to write descriptions of 15 games because I added the 2 extra suggestions to each of the 5, so it's taken me a while, and might be a while before I get another one of these ones out, in particular this 5 must-play video. I'll probably do a couple of other videos in between. We'll see. Depends on what I got time for. Depends on if the real world interferes in my video making. But the opinions expressed in this video are those of 2D Gamer, and if you do not like his picks, I guess that's okay.